Reminded I'm supposed to tell you that when an in-person meeting is impossible or impractical, Iowa Code Section 21.8 permits a governmental body to conduct a meeting by electronic means. I think that'll cover it. So let's call the meeting to order, and if the administrator would call the roll.
Hank Bagelmann.
Here.
Kate Payne.
Here.
Doug Benschoter.
Here.
Rich Dane.
Here.
Mary French.
Here.
Stephanie Garner.
Here.
David Huser. Kathy Olson.
Here.
Heidi Solheim.
Here.
Well, appreciate you all taking this time to come together.
Sorry.
Those things happen. First thing is to approve tonight's agenda. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you. And any other discussion? None? Then those in favor say yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Those opposed,
Yes.
no. And the agenda is approved as presented. There are no minutes. There is no public hearing, so we'll move directly into regular business. We called a special meeting of the commission to consider a review of the new West Waverly Urban Renewal Plan to determine that it is in conformance with the general plan for development of the city as a whole and provide a written recommendation of this finding to the Waverly City Council. You also need to know that while this is not a public hearing, a notice of public hearing for the City Council was presented in the November 5th edition of the Waverly newspaper to take care of their meeting, which will be held later this month. So with that, Isaac, if you'll begin and give us an overview, and Bill, we're going to be calling on you too. Bill, Isaac says you're going to be doing the overview.
I can do that. So what we have done is we're trying to fix something that we should have done last Thursday, and I apologize. The instructions that came from our attorneys in Des Moines indicated that we had to approve the new West Waverly Urban Renewal Plan, and basically to recommend approval of it to the council as being in compliance with the comprehensive plan that we have in place. And as you know, what we've done is we have removed the Red Fox property and the Meyer Hanson property, or we are going to do that on Monday, from the unified plan, which is our existing plan. And our existing plan, which once we remove it, we can place it into a different plan. So this is a plan that we're creating specifically for the Red Fox and the Meyer Hanson properties and the 20th Street corridor in order to take advantage of the plan that would allow for us to use the blight designation. I think if anybody that's been past the Red Fox can see that there are some blight issues with regards to that property in the last several years. And with the Meyer Hanson property, we also believe that that is relevant for purposes of the waterways, the fill that has to be dealt with, some of those things that will allow us to use this new plan in a little different way. So the prerequisite for us is to go before the planning and zoning before we go to council, and that's what we're doing tonight. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
You're muted, Hank.
The floor is open.
What do you mean about the waterways in that area, Bill?
So I'm specifically talking about the Meyer Hanson property. There's actually two different waterways that connect in that Meyer Hanson property, and then they go underneath 20th Street, the mud gravel road that's not developed, and then that water goes all the way across, and then everything joins from there and goes underneath the railroad tracks, and everything comes through the golf course, past the bowling alley, and into the river. So this is an important waterway issue, and it's not been, I mean, if you're going to redo that road, you're going to have to redo waterway issues. And so we realize that there's a lot of issues to be dealt with Meyer Hanson property. I've talked with the owner about it. I think everybody's in favor of putting this into a special urban renewal plan that involves light, and because it may take quite a bit of effort to deal with the waterway issues, deal with the water detention. The road itself is going to be placed into this new plan, so that 20th Street possibly in the future could be updated, and we could use TIF funds to do that.
So you're saying that the Meyer Hanson property is going to be considered blighted?
Yes.
Or it would possibly receive those blighted grant funds?
So when you talk about, we believe that it has the characteristics of a blighted property because of the fact that of the topography of it, the fill that was actually, there's a lot of fill that's been put into the woods, to the trees. There's a sanitary sewer that goes through the property that probably is going to have to be relocated. There are access issues. There's 20th Street issues. I think if you give everything, if you look at the whole consideration of the whole thing, it's possible I think it's definitely the case with regards to that property, and especially with regards to the Red Fox property. So the whole area, if you look at it together as one piece, I believe it's blighted, and it's going to need a lot of improvement in the future.
Bill, question for you. Was that property properly compacted when the fill was put in? And secondly, when they put the fill in, how did that impact the flood mitigation, if anything?
Well, actually, we don't believe that that all of the fill, I mean, there's a lot of the fill that may have been put in properly, but I don't think it's compacted to the point of, if you were going to do a major renovation or development in that area, that you would trust the way that was done. It was done kind of taking that fill from the Bremer Avenue project and basically just dumping it as fast and as quickly as you could. That's what happened. I don't think there was a lot of plan about how that was done. In fact, they covered our sanitary sewer, which had to be dug out. So there's issues. I'm not saying it's a major issue, but there are issues with regards to making that effective in the future for development.
Okay, right. Another reason why it's blighted is because of the compaction. But what about the flood plan and so forth? And did that impact the way the flood mitigation works?
So I believe what we would look at in this situation is, if that were to be developed, we would want a flood, just a water plan, a water discharge plan. I mean, obviously, when you get to that 20th Street corridor, there's going to have to be a waterway and probably a culvert, something that goes underneath that road. We like to have detention all along the major waterways, and considering that this is a waterway that goes all the way through the area south of the high school, and that waterway all starts with this property. It goes through underneath the railroad tracks, and then it goes through the golf course. It all ends up going by the bowling alley and that area through there and then goes into the river at that point. So it's a pretty large area for collection from both the south and the west.
So how would this influence whether I think this is a good decision to change this urban renewal area?
What the new urban renewal plan allows us under the blighted designation is to provide for more of an unlimited ability to collect increment. So most of the areas now after 95 are limited to 20 years. These properties have been in there for more than 5 years. And so we would have the ability to do an unlimited collection of increment to help fund projects in this area.
Okay, I get that, but how is the water issue relevant?
So the water issue is a public issue. I mean, whether we have drainage issues of water, we have to deal with that as a city. So we can't allow them to develop this without taking into consideration the water that's being that's coming through this area. I'm not saying that the city has the responsibility to do it, but by putting it into a new area, we have some ability to collect increment from the development in this area to actually then use that money to do to improve the infrastructure. So there's nothing guaranteeing that we're going to give any money whatsoever, that we're going to do any incentives or any projects whatsoever. But it gives us the opportunity to do that. And I think that's important in this situation because this is an area that it should be developed. It's on two corridors. It's on the Highway 3 coming into town. It's on 10th Avenue. We'd like to see development in this area. It's an eyesore. It really needs some assistance. This gives us an opportunity to help where we can. It doesn't require us to help.
You know, Bill, regarding the water issue, I have a fair amount of experience out there. And frankly, as you know, and have stated, this is the beginning of that watershed area. And very, very little water ever flows through there. I've never seen it, frankly, flow. And it certainly doesn't go over the water or road there. So I don't think that we have a real concern regarding the watershed. I just don't see that. And Doug mentioned earlier the blighted grant dollars that are available. Tell us more about that and why additional incentives are necessary.
So the only thing that we're changing by putting it from one district to another, because it's already in an urban renewal district. So by putting it into a new district, we expand the years that we can collect increment in the event that we wish to do a project in that area. It does not require us to do a project in that area. The water you're talking about is not a problem because CUNA has a terrific retention system, but that water all still flows through underneath the Highway 3 into this area. And then you have water that comes from the south that actually comes through this area in a storm sewer situation. And we have a sanitary sewer that goes through this area also that goes through. So we were going to put the Red Fox in basically because we all know that one is pretty clearly an area that has that needs help and that has substantial problems with it. So, and this allows us to put the property to the south, which has further issues with regards to 20th Street. And that 20th Street connection is going to improve the area to the east also, because if ever that's developed, that middle area, you're going to have an access from both the 20th Street and 16th Street. Now, I don't know when and if we're going to do a project there. but this just gives us more opportunities. And it allows us to work with the Red Fox property, because if it weren't for changing to a blight designation, we would not be able to provide assistance to the multifamily portion of that project, which I think is pretty important for us to both incent both the commercial and the multifamily aspect of the Red Fox development.
So really what we're trying to do, I think, Bill, just to restate what you just talked about, was to remove it from the unified plan into a different classification so that it becomes a TIF district. It enables us to become a TIF district, particularly for where the Red Fox is at, but it could also then be used for the Meyer Hanson property.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
We already have it in the unified, but we want to make sure that this is very specific for this West Waverly district.
So then my other question then becomes, I noticed that it's currently zoned C3, and it said that there wasn't any need to change that classification, but with multi-residential housing, can that be classified under a C3?
I don't know that it's a C3. Is it, Isaac? I think it's a C2.
C2.
Oh, I meant C2, I'm sorry. Yeah. So can you have apartments in a C2 as well as commercial property?
You can. Apartment buildings can be cited in a C2 district.
Okay.
We have specifications about how many units that multifamily residential has to be, though, in a C2.
Actually, you have to have more than 12. Yeah, more than 12 in that district to do a C2. You can't do a 4-plex or a 5-plex or a 6-plex. You have to do a 12 or more in a C2 district.
Okay, thanks.
So wherein would be the controversy about this?
I'm hoping there isn't any controversy about this, because we're really keeping it in an urban renewal plan area. It gives us more flexibility to go longer if we need to. If you look at what we've actually offered, and which is on the agenda for Monday, is a 7-year max on the incentives that we're offering for the development of the Red Fox. There is absolutely no commitment that the city is making to the Meyer Hanson property owners. It would depend upon what they're asking for, what the development is, what the need is, what we have to do. So this is just giving the opportunity to use that if we need to.
Bill, something I read today indicates you want to lock the tax rate in based on the current assessor's valuation, and that's key to making this whole thing work. Tell us more about that.
It actually isn't necessarily key, because I think what we've done is the new basis would be less for the Red Fox. So it was $1.4 million when we put the Red Fox in as the base, and the new base would be $993,360 if I think that's what exactly it is. So that would give us another $400,000 to $500,000 of basis reduction so that we could capture more increment. Now, we haven't offered 100% of any increment. We've offered some percentage. I know there's 100% of the increment that is created in the first 2 years, but the 4 years after that are sliding scale 80, 60, 40, 20, in order to give incentives for them to keep developing and opening and operating operating the property as we hope it's going to be operated in the future.
What is the financial risk, if any, to the city?
The only risk is that we give money to a project that they already pay up, because we're only giving them back what they pay. So they're going to pay taxes based on the $993,360 in property tax valuation. And we're not touching that at all. The city will receive that, and we haven't received that for several years. So that's tax money that's going to come back into the coffers. In addition to that, when it goes up to 2.2 million and then to 5 million, we're going to be in the first 2 years not receiving anything additional. But after that, we're going to be receiving 20, 40, 60, 80% more from the additional revenue that's generated. And after that, 100% of that revenue is going to come back into the city's general fund.
Okay, so what if, for whatever reasons, this is a really naive question, okay? But what if they, for whatever reason, don't develop it?
So there won't be any increment generated, and they won't be paid any money. So when it comes down to it, we don't pay anything other than what they pay first. We just rebate it.
Yep, that's helpful.
Bill, I have a question. This is Dave Huser. What if there's issues with the Meyer Hanson property where there wasn't good compaction, and it's going to take some redoing to that whole thing? Would that be considered an improvement? I just, is the city gaining? They found a dumping ground for all this that was being taken out of Bremer Avenue, and then it wasn't compacted correctly. There was issues with the sewer. If it has to be redone, is that, and if somebody would happen to buy it and want to do some kind of a commercial type of a project and they have to redo all that, who benefits from that? It looks to me like that could be something that the city loses by approving that Meyer Hanson property. I don't know, I could be wrong, but I get concerned about that Meyer Hanson property and what can be done with it.
So by putting this into it's already in the urban renewal plan. So it's already in the unified plan. By adding it, by extending it into this plan, we extend the amount of time that we could collect the increment from it. It's not making any guarantee or any promise or anything with regards to how it's developed. If it's developed in a way that we don't support or we don't think is something that the city needs to provide benefits to, we won't give them $1. I mean, if you build if you want to come in and put in a project that's going to put in 400 jobs, then maybe we want to give some incentives for that. It really depends on how they're going to develop. This is just the opportunity, and the common thread here is the 20th Street corridor. So if we're going to do the 20th Street corridor for the redevelopment of the Red Fox, and that's going to benefit the development of the Meyer Hanson property. And they do a lot of development that wouldn't we want to capture that increment in case we want to pay for that those street improvements? It allows us to capture that. If they're going to get the advantage of the street being improved, why not capture what they're going to generate in additional tax revenue to help us pay for that, whatever improvements we agree to? We're not trying to give them any benefit, but if we benefit them by doing a road improvement project, we want to put them in that TIF district so that we can collect from them and to help pay for that.
Bill, a question on that 20th Street improvement. I believe when I looked at the plan, the easement for 20th goes right through the middle of the east wing of the Red Fox, which is where you're going to put the apartments.
Well, we're going to fix that. My guess is that Beacon got it wrong. We believe that there's probably documentation that's going to be found with regards to how that is done. And even if there's not found, we're going to take care of that when we sell the property to the new developers, because we're going to vacate that right away and actually identify where it ends and where it, so we don't have any responsibility beyond that. I don't think it was ever, my guess is that it was vacated at some point by the council, but they don't always pick that up in the records. And I don't know if you remember a few years ago when we fixed a lot of things over at Wartburg because we had roads going through their buildings in a lot of different areas. And it wasn't because they were actually not vacated, they just weren't shown of record. So we're going to make it clear when we do this transaction that we don't have a street through their office or their apartment building.
Was all of this made, I wouldn't say public, but at the point where you chose who would purchase and get that property, was all of this already known that this was the plan?
Well, if you watch the council meeting where the council chose between the two RFPs that were submitted, we did about a 4-month or 5-month process of soliciting people to actually put RFPs in. There were several others that ended up pulling out and didn't submit to the final version. I think we had 5 total interested parties in this property, and we told them what we wanted them to present to the council, and they presented their concepts, and we presented that information to the council, and the council made that decision.
Bill, how much is the city being paid for the Red Fox property?
$1.
$1?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
because we're really, the RFP was actually presented to folks as, we want their proposal to the extent that we would provide the property without charge, with not more than $1. But we expected them to tell us what their proposal was and how they would complete the project.
You also said before that no tax has been received on the Red Fox for a number of years. I know 18 months ago it was up to date because they were being paid by a group out of Dubuque. So the property taxes were being paid up till 18 months ago, and I assume probably since that time. And I'm not sure why additional incentive is necessary if you gave somebody $1 million property for $1.
So the entity from Dubuque actually bought the taxes, so they could have received title to the property. We don't know what would have happened there. When we had the ability to buy this through acquire this for nothing through the 657A Iowa law that allows us to do this as a city because it was abandoned. We took advantage of that. And during that process, the money that was paid towards the taxes was actually paid back to the tax sale purchaser. What we really wanted to do was to get this property without paying a dime, which is what we did, so that we could control and make sure that it was developed properly in the future. And by doing that, we avoided the unknown and the uncertainty of having someone try to cobble it together and do some kind of project that didn't really work. And frankly, I was so happy to find out that we had a lot of interest in people that would want to redo the property and not to tear it down, because that cost would have been astronomical.
Bill, what's the valuation on the Meyer Hanson property?
I don't know if you have that, Isaac. I don't remember what the assessed value is at this point. That's going to be the base value.
I'm looking.
So is it what's on the assessor's page on Beacon?
Yes, and it hasn't changed since it was put in, what, 4 years ago or 5 years ago.
Okay.
The kind of the issue before this group is to say, I mean, it was already in an urban renewal plan. We're not changing, we're not putting a property that wasn't in before. We're just putting it from one into another, which gives us a different ability to work with whoever develops that property, depending upon what they do with that property. And I just didn't think it was appropriate to say, we're going to do the Red Fox, but we're just going to leave Meyer Hanson out there. And frankly, the way the attorneys in Des Moines tell me, by putting 20th Street in, we can use funds from both plans to do 20th Street. I think it's more appropriate to use the increment that we capture from the development adjacent to 20th Street to do that. So I think it still gives us, we can be in both plans with the 20th Street corridor.
Well, I think the best thing is, the plus is that it gives the city more flexibility in what you can do.
It's going to be difficult to get somebody to want to buy that property that had to pay off the taxes. I mean, you start with $100,000 that you'd have to pay out. And by doing it this way, we are able to get a developer in to make it more likely and more and easier for them to do the right development, because they're not having to pay off the tax sale purchaser.
Bill, do you think, would you have been asking for the same thing if the other proposal would have been picked? It seems like that's the only way they could do the housing and the other plan too.
Yes. We were trying to figure out how to give incentives for housing in addition to the commercial side, because the current plan only allows incentives for commercial, whereas the blighted plan allows us to give incentives for both commercial and multifamily residential.
The comp plan outlines that entire area as commercial with residential then to the east. Is that not correct?
I believe that's correct, although I think I think that was a default. At some point, that whole area with the Robertson Bry area to the east of this property was all considered. I think it was commercial or it was not residential as far as I know. I think it was more commercial, if I remember rightly.
I think it's only commercial along 12th or whatever that road is, 10th.
You could be right. I think we all kind of estimate what we think they might do, but I think in terms of, I think it was shopping center. It might have been shopping center, actually, if I remember the right designation for that. That whole property in between, someday, hopefully that will be developed in a way that fits in with everything around it now, because there's a lot of things around it that you have housing, you have school, you have commercial, and you have a corridor. So I think we all guess when it's all farmland, but hopefully in the future we can see development that will work with all sides.
Hank, what's a comp plan show?
David, I just walked over there, and the block between 20th and I believe it's 10th,
16th,
yeah, is all C2. It's mixed use.
It's all C2.
Yep.
Bill, the improvements to 20th Street wouldn't occur until some development on the Meyer Hanson property was being done. Is that fair to say? Or would they do the improvements right away? Because it could be 10 or 12 years before any development was done on the Meyer Hanson, and you wouldn't have any revenue to help support paying for the improvements to 20th Street.
So any improvements on 20th Street has to just, you have to get in line with the capital plan of the council when it comes down to it. Yeah. You'd have to see how the Red Fox property is developed. There's property.
You're muted.
I'm sorry, I didn't press hard enough. Sorry. So the property that is, in addition to the Red Fox area, there's some area that could be developed in different ways that might really benefit from a connection to 10th Avenue. But we'd have to weigh the cost of developing 20th Street with what benefits you'd get, because they still have access to Highway 3, obviously. So it really is a council decision as to whether they would ever or when they would improve 20th Street. My guess is it would require even more than a Meyer Hanson development or a new Red Fox development. It might require an idea of what's going to happen to the east, because it's going to benefit both east and west and north.
Is that road not open right now?
We closed it because it shouldn't be open at all, because it's just a mud path.
Got it.
And that's the way people were coming in to actually, we weren't sure how the property was being vandalized. We probably figured out that later that was more by foot than by car, but there wasn't any reason for anybody to be driving through that mud road.
I do not have in front of me the motion, but I would be happy to present it if someone could read it to me. I think it's basically approval of this removal to a new to a new district.
Kathy, I can do it if you want.
I don't have the right language to.
Yeah. Recommend approval of the resolution for the adoption of the West Waverly Urban Renewal Plan.
Thank you, Doug. So move.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second that.
Stephanie Garner, thank you. Any further discussion?
Bill, what do we know about the need for multifamily housing? There's been an awful lot of multifamily built in the last several years, and frankly, we need commercial space. I'm not sure why changing this really makes a lot of sense, and I don't know the number of units they're looking at building, but I think a lot of change is being done based on an assumption that probably isn't based on a lot of fact.
Our new housing assessment from Intercog shows that despite the fact that we have 10 new units, probably 120 to 30 units in the last 5 years, there remains a demand. All of those properties that have been built have a very low vacancy rate. I don't know that I would say that I want to go out there and try to find a whole lot more at this point, but I also think that that back room or that back building, when you're talking about 72 units in that back building, in addition to the 48 up front, I think that is what is not probably warranted economically in the community, 110 units as far as hotel units. So it makes sense to look at that building separately and consider it as a 34-unit apartment building. We know that that can be used as extended stay. It can be very variable. Even those the front 48 units that they're talking about building, they're going to create some of those as rooms that could be used as extended stay, which could have little kitchenettes and that kind of thing in them. And so we think flexibility is the best way to approach this project. It was really the number of units that were available there. Most of the people that looked at it said that was too many units to do that hotel and convention center. They didn't need that many units. We're going to take them at their word. We don't know that. We didn't do any studies. At this point, we know that housing on that west side could be very desirable for the CUNA people. And we know that there's quite a few CUNA people that actually transferred up here from Cedar Falls. With Dahlstrom's units, they could get out of their lease in Cedar Falls and come up to Waverly, and maybe they'd rather be out on the west side near their jobs. I'm not judging that. I think it's an arguable position. But I think the housing study does not say that we don't need more multifamily.
Yeah, that's, it's an interesting question with respect to how this might in any way serve employees of CUNA and so on. And, I just also think an unknown out there is because of the virus, the whole workplace concept is under huge change.
Yeah, we consider that also because we know how many people are actually working from home. Mm-hmm. And we're only hoping that might be because they have the whole structure out there, which with a lot of ability to put people on site, that maybe they'll just increase the numbers that they can hire and employ out of Waverly because they can employ more people online from their home and in the building that they have.
I think another thing to take away from the question that was asked about do we need that many apartments is really goes back to the initial part of the conversation having to do with it's really an eyesore. It's a dilapidated building that you needed to do something with and change it. And if this is an opportunity and it just happens to be in the same kind of situation where you're going to have apartments because that's what's there now or hotel rooms. It seems like an opportunity to take advantage and just clean it up.
All five of the potential developers that looked at this property were going to convert that back building to residential. So it wasn't anybody that was going to use it for hotel. So, I mean, that was a consensus of everybody that looked at it.
Call the question.
Okay, let me repeat the motion so we're clear about what we have. It's to confirm that the plan is in conformance with the general plan for development of the city as a whole, and the commission recommends approval of the plan by the city council. Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Stephanie Garner.
Yes.
David Huser.
Yes.
Kathy Olson.
Yes.
Heidi Solheim.
Yes.
Hank Bagelmann.
Yes.
Kate Payne.
Yes.
Doug Benschoter.
Yes.
Rich Dane.
No.
Mary French.
Yes.
The vote is 8 in favor, 1 opposed, and the motion is carried. Is there any additional business? If not, do I hear a motion for adjournment?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say yes.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Appreciate your being here. Tim?